Over the past week, millions of American families opened their pantries and saw less than they expected. A few missing cans, a fridge that looks a little emptier than usual. And behind that empty space on the shelf, there's a story. A story about power, about priorities, and about who we choose to be as a country. Now, most folks weren't following the legal filings or the back and forth in Washington. They were just trying to figure out how to stretch what's left in the cupboard. But what happened this week matters. The Supreme Court, in a narrow decision, allowed the Trump administration to block nearly $4 billion in food aid. That means millions of low-income Americans, seniors, and children could see their benefits delayed or reduced right as grocery prices are rising and wages haven't caught up. Now the lawyers will tell you this is temporary, that the justices issued a stay while the case works its way through the courts. But for the families who depend on that aid, there's nothing temporary about an empty stomach. This moment isn't just about budgets or procedure. It's about what we value. It's about whether, in the richest nation on earth, we still believe that no one should have to wonder where their next meal will come from. So tonight, I want to take a moment to talk about what this decision means, not just for the law books, but for the lives behind them. Because this isn't just a policy dispute. It's a test of our national character.
Now, here's what happened. A few weeks ago, the federal government faced a funding standoff, one that left critical programs hanging in the balance. Among them was the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, what most people call food stamps. SNAP isn't a handout, it's a lifeline. It helps over 40 million Americans, families working long hours, veterans on fixed incomes, kids who rely on school lunches that sometimes are the only real meal of the day. Congress had already approved the money, but as the shutdown dragged on, the Trump administration moved to withhold roughly $4 billion in aid, arguing that distributing it now would strain emergency funds. A lower court stepped in, ordering those payments to continue, reminding the administration that hunger doesn't wait for politics to settle. But this week, the Supreme Court stepped in and hit pause. They allowed the administration to block that aid, at least for now, while the appeals process plays out. Now, to some, this might sound like just another tug-of-war between branches of government. But for a single mom in Cleveland trying to feed 2 kids on $15 an hour, for an elderly couple in Baton Rouge who've already cut their meals down to 1 a day, this isn't an abstract debate. It's the difference between dinner and an empty plate. And that's where the problem lies. Too often, when decisions like this are made, the human faces fade from view. The conversation becomes about budgets and balances, not about people.
When the court makes a ruling like this, it's not just ink on paper. It's a signal about who gets seen and who gets forgotten. And if we start treating food as a privilege instead of a basic human need, we risk losing something deeper than a program or a policy. We risk losing a piece of our shared humanity. When we talk about $4 billion in aid, it's easy to lose sight of what that really means. It's not just a line in a budget. It's groceries in a cart. It's cereal on a breakfast table. It's the quiet dignity of being able to feed your family without fear or shame. Let me tell you what that looks like in real life. There's a mother in Dayton, Ohio, working 2 jobs, raising 2 kids. She told a local reporter that this month, her benefits might not come through. So she's been stretching what she has. A little milk, a few boxes of pasta, hoping it lasts until payday. She said, "I don't mind going hungry if my kids can eat." That's not a choice any parent should have to make in America. There's a veteran in Texas, 73 years old. He served 2 tours in Vietnam, came home, worked construction his whole life. Now he lives on a small pension and SNAP. He said the hardest part isn't the hunger. It's the feeling that the country he fought for forgot about him. And there's a young man in Detroit, works the night shift at a grocery store. Irony of it is, he helps stock the very food he can't afford to buy. He told a volunteer at a food bank, "I'm feeding the city, but I can't feed myself." That shouldn't be his reality. Not here. Not now. These are the people we're talking about. Not numbers. Not headlines. People. With stories, with families, with dreams that look just like yours and mine. When we talk about policy, we can't forget the faces behind it. Because every cut, every ruling, every delay, it lands somewhere. And most of the time, it lands on those who already have the least cushion to fall back on. That's why this moment matters. Because when we look at these faces, we're not seeing strangers. We're seeing ourselves, reflected in a different set of circumstances. And that simple truth should be enough to remind us our humanity is bound together. What happens to one of us happens to all of us. So we've seen the headlines, we've seen the families. Now let's talk about the bigger question. The question at the heart of every democracy. How do we choose to exercise power? And what do we choose to prioritize? In America, we have a saying, the measure of our greatness is not how we treat the strong, but how we treat the weak. It's easy sometimes to see policy as numbers on a page. Dollars allocated, programs approved, rulings issued. But policy is never abstract. Policy has a heartbeat. It reaches into homes. It shapes days and nights. It decides who eats, who sleeps, who goes to bed worried about tomorrow. When the Supreme Court steps in, as it did this week, it's exercising authority that shapes not just law, but life itself. And when that authority is used to withhold aid from people who need it most, we have to ask ourselves, what are we saying about our priorities? Now, I'm not here to argue politics. I'm here to ask a simple moral question. Is it acceptable in the wealthiest nation on earth for children, seniors, and hardworking families to go hungry because of a decision made in the halls of power? We've faced hard times before. The Great Depression, civil rights struggles, the aftermath of wars. And in those moments, we learn something important, that our greatness is measured by our capacity for compassion, for empathy, and for justice. Law, politics, and budgets tell only part of the story. At its heart, this is a matter of morality. It's the choices we make when no one is watching. It's whether, as a nation, we lift up the vulnerable or leave them to fend for themselves. This is the conversation we need to have. Because the Supreme Court's ruling, while legal in nature, carries a moral weight that affects millions of Americans tonight, tomorrow, and for months to come. It reminds us that policy is more than policy. It's who we are and who we aspire to be.
We've seen the challenge. We've seen the struggle. Now we ask, what can we do? Where do we go from here? The truth is, the law may feel distant, the courts may feel remote, but our actions are immediate. We can't wait for policy alone to solve hunger. We have to step up as communities, as neighbors, as citizens. Support your local food bank. Check in on a neighbor. Volunteer your time. Even small acts can ripple outward in ways that change lives. And yes, we also need to hold our leaders accountable. We must remind them, gently but firmly, that government exists to serve the people, not the other way around. That means demanding policies that protect the most vulnerable, advocating for programs like SNAP, and voting with conscience. History has shown us that America is strongest when we act collectively, when we prioritize compassion alongside commerce, humanity alongside governance. We've faced tough moments before, recessions, wars, crises. And each time, ordinary Americans, acting with courage and care, have moved us forward. So this moment isn't for us to focus on court rulings alone, or a budget line, or even politics. Let's think about the choices we make every day, whether we look away or whether we reach out, whether we complain or whether we build. And in those choices, we define the America we want to leave for our children.
As we come to the close of this discussion, I want us to remember something simple, yet profound. America has always been at its best when we see each other, not as opponents, but as neighbors. When we measure our progress not only by the wealth we create, but by the care we show. When we believe that every child deserves to go to bed with a full stomach, and every senior deserves dignity in their final years, this moment, the Supreme Court's ruling, the delay in SNAP benefits, it's challenging, yes. It tests our patience, our empathy, our resolve. But it also reminds us of something strong, that the soul of our nation doesn't rest in courts or budgets alone. It lives in the hearts of its people. We still have a choice. We can choose to look away, to let politics determine who eats, who sleeps, who thrives, or we can choose to act with compassion, with courage, and with clarity. And when we act together, that's when America becomes more than a nation. It becomes a community, a family, a promise. So tonight, I ask you, as citizens, as neighbors, as human beings, to remember the families behind the headlines, the children behind the numbers, the veterans and the workers whose quiet struggles too often go unseen. Because that's the America we still believe in. The America where empathy is strength, where justice is not partisan, where no one is left wondering if they'll eat tonight. And if we hold fast to that belief, if we act on it every day, then we can meet this moment and every moment after it with the character and courage that define us together.